The happiest and most cherished days of the year are approaching. Lights, music, laughter, and joy already fill the streets and hearts. But these are also days when, amid all the bustle and rejoicing, stories of sorrow, but also of goodness and hope, must be told and remembered. Many years ago, on Christmas Eve, while the grown-ups were preparing dinner, my grandmother used to tell all the children in the family a story in front of the Christmas tree. This story recently came back to me when I saw the atmosphere that once again begins to spread throughout the city. My grandmother told us in a deep voice that many years ago, in some city in Central Europe, there lived a very poor young woman named Ingrid, who survived in the cold and snow with the little money she earned by doing odd jobs and begging on the streets, bravely and tenaciously facing the harsh climate and the contempt of the people. But her circumstances hadn't always been so harsh. This young woman actually came from a wealthy family, and during her childhood she had lived surrounded by numerous comforts. However, her father had recklessly squandered the family fortune, leaving them all in poverty, and both he and her mother had soon succumbed to grief and illness, leaving Ingrid alone in the midst of a merciless world indifferent to her adversity. Thus arrived the last days of the year, and Ingrid walked through the now snow-covered streets, observing with bitterness and melancholy the festive atmosphere, the lights, and the happiness of the people, which only served to remind her and make her unfortunate situation even more painful. Her luck, however, seemed about to change one cold morning when, distressed by her circumstances, she was leaving a church where she had been praying, seeking some solace for her misfortune. For a woman of aristocratic bearing, dressed in ostentatious clothes and glittering jewels, inadvertently approached the thoughtful Ingrid, bringing her out of her reverie. After greeting her kindly, she told her that she had been told that she was in a difficult situation and urgently needed some work. Ingrid was initially overwhelmed by the lady's imposing presence, but the benevolence of her face and the warmth and courtesy of her demeanor quickly made her recover, and with all the firmness she could muster, she replied yes, that she was willing to accept any kind of work. The woman seemed pleased with this answer and told Ingrid that if so, she needed someone to help her with the preparations for a ball she was organizing at her house for the following Saturday night in celebration of the upcoming Christmas festivities. She asked her if she would be interested. Ingrid, barely able to contain her enthusiasm for the opportunity, replied that of course, that she had previously worked at other balls and other events in great houses. The aristocrat, smiling, then thanked Ingrid for her interest, gave her the address where she should go the following Saturday, and gave her some coins. Ingrid shuddered at the cold touch of the strange lady's hand, who bid the young woman a fond farewell and disappeared into the crowd as discreetly as she had appeared. The confused Ingrid remained standing in the square for a few moments, overwhelmed both by joy at the job she had been offered so unexpectedly and by the surprise at the disconcerting presence and attitude of that enigmatic aristocrat. In her hand, she could feel the coins the mysterious woman had given her, and she still remembered the cold touch of her skin. Her attention seemed to finally return to reality, as she then noticed that some people nearby were staring at her with puzzled expressions, and that some children even seemed to mock her and make gestures as if she were crazy. But Ingrid was too excited by the stroke of luck she had just had to be worried by such incomprehensible reactions, so she chose to ignore those people and return home. The day of the Christmas ball finally arrived. Ingrid had been feeling more and more excited as the day drew near, so on Saturday morning, wanting to arrive on time and make the best impression, she got ready to dress and groom herself as best she could and headed resolutely to the address given to her by the woman who had spoken to her in the church square a few days earlier. Just as she had imagined, it was a huge and ostentatious mansion on the outskirts of town, but she was surprised by the aged and neglected appearance of the magnificent residence, which seemed to have seen better days, as if it had been abandoned years before. Ingrid, however, ignored this and knocked on the door. The same woman she had spoken to opened the door and, after politely greeting Ingrid and thanking her for coming, invited her in. In contrast to the sordid exterior, the interior of the mansion was incredibly luxurious and bright. Ingrid couldn't remember ever having seen such a display of wealth, furniture made of the finest woods, Curtains made of the most sumptuous fabrics, floors of the most gleaming marble, ceilings decorated with gold leaf coffered ceilings. Everything Ingrid laid her eyes on was opulent beyond her wildest imagination. But what soon caught her attention was that, apart from her hostess and herself, there seemed to be no one else in the sumptuous mansion. The aristocrat who had summoned Ingrid led her to a charming living room where she offered her hot coffee and scones. Once the young woman had adequately satisfied her appetite, she proceeded to show her the different rooms, the dazzling ballroom where the Christmas ball would be held, lavishly decorated with garlands and presided over by a colossal tree, where a large mirror with a gold frame caught her attention, the enormous kitchen, the splendidly stocked wine cellar, and she explained the tasks she would be performing, preparing the appetizers and drinks that would be served during the party, welcoming her guests and taking care of their coats, arranging refreshments on the tables, serving wine, keeping the ballroom clean and tidy during the celebration, and basically attending to any need the partygoers might have. Ingrid felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the task, and trying to appear as confident as possible, she asked her hostess where the other servants were. She replied that unfortunately there was no one else, but that she was sure she would be able to handle it, which was why she had offered her the job. Before Ingrid could reply, the woman smiled at her and left, leaving the young woman feeling uneasy. Ingrid needed a few minutes to recover, but she finally took a breath, remembered that she needed the money she was going to earn and that the mysterious aristocrat seemed to blindly trust her abilities. So, with hesitant steps, she headed to the kitchen and began to plan how she was going to organize the tasks. For the next hours, Ingrid worked very hard, alone and silent, preparing exquisite appetizers and chilling drinks, before arranging everything on the large tables that lined the dazzling ballroom, which she had previously cleaned. When the time came for the guests to begin arriving, Ingrid tidied herself up as best she could and ran to the front door to greet them. They began to arrive punctually, but unlike what the girl had seen from other aristocrats she had worked for in the past, everyone greeted her and spoke to her with the utmost kindness, praising her extraordinary work. Ingrid couldn't repress a certain blush at receiving such unusual politeness, and as she put away the elegant coats she thought that the carriages in which the guests were supposed to be arriving were nowhere to be seen or heard. The Christmas ball finally began in the ballroom. Ingrid couldn't remember ever having seen such a display of splendor and brightness, as the ball guests danced in perfect harmony to the most lively melodies, as if in a dream of elegance, light, and music. But Ingrid could hardly admire all this magnificence, bustling to the point of exhaustion carrying trays of food and bottles of drink, refilling the dancers' glasses when they paused, and picking up and wiping away any mess that might have been on the tables and floors. As the hours of the ball slowly passed, fatigue gradually took hold of Ingrid, who nevertheless struggled to ignore it and continue performing her duties with the utmost speed and diligence, until around her the grand ballroom and the ornate dancers seemed to merge into a dreamlike fantasy of dazzling lights, dancing figures, dissonant melodies, and dazzling colors. But Ingrid could only remain oblivious to these splendors and continue with her work, while her limbs seemed to weigh more and her thoughts gradually sank into a fog of fatigue and unreality in which the existence of anything else in the world slowly faded away. Ingrid's fatigue became such that at one point she had to hastily leave a tray full of empty glasses on the table, her legs unable to support even the small weight. She fell to her knees, panting and disoriented. Around her, the dancing and music continued, unaware of her discomfort. Frustration and shame gradually took hold of Ingrid, who felt she had failed the woman who had hired her and hadn't lived up to her expectations. Lost in these thoughts, Ingrid didn't notice a figure approaching until a friendly, though cold, hand rested on her shoulder, comforting her in her grief. Surprised, Ingrid looked up and saw that it was a handsome, elegantly dressed young man, whom she didn't recall seeing all evening, but who smiled warmly and kindly as he helped her to her feet. A blush began to take hold of Ingrid as her fatigue and dejection gradually faded away, and then, with an elegant gesture, the strange young man invited Ingrid to dance with him to the cheerful melody that was beginning to be played. Ingrid tried to politely decline the invitation, for she still felt tired and knew that her clothes were little better than rags. but the elegant young man continued to insist, and then several aristocratic ladies came up to her and with words of joy and cordiality encouraged her to join them at the dance. Stammering, Ingrid replied that she was not dressed for such an occasion, but the ladies told her she was confused, because she was the best dressed of them all. Ingrid then felt a strange sensation come over her, and when she looked at her clothes, intrigued, she realized that she was no longer wearing her shabby clothes, but a superb and refined red gown, and that her shoes and hair were elegantly styled. The music seemed to reach its climax then, and she felt the tiredness in her body had completely vanished, and driven by a feeling of joy and well-being, and encouraged by the people around her, Ingrid forgot all doubts and inhibitions and launched herself into the center of the dance floor hand in hand with her mysterious partner. In later years, Ingrid would remember that ball as if it had been a dream. For what seemed like hours, she danced with the enigmatic young man who had invited her to the sound of lively melodies, immersed in the harmonious choreography formed by the dancing couples in the ornate and glittering ballroom, filled with a sense of joy and bliss such as she didn't think she had ever experienced before. All the unspeakable sorrows she had endured throughout her life, even the recent fatigue from the exhausting work she had been doing for that very party, seemed to vanish amid the joy of the celebration, the dazzling lights of the Christmas decorations, and the infectious cadence of the music, while the very reality of the world beyond the walls of the splendid ballroom blurred amid the harmonious unfolding of the Christmas ball. Not even the incomprehensible coldness of her dance partner's hands seemed to bother Ingrid for some time. However, on several occasions, her gaze passed fleetingly by the large gold-framed mirror that dominated one wall of the ballroom, and something in the reflection it gave back, although she couldn't quite make out what it was, made her begin to think there was something odd about the celebration. Several times Ingrid tried to look more closely at the mirror, but the frenzy of the dancing always prevented her from doing so, while a feeling of strangeness and even discomfort grew inside her. But Ingrid didn't give up, and while the Christmas ball continued, oblivious to her growing unease, she struggled to draw her partner toward the mirror, eager to see what was causing his unease. Her eyes finally managed to make out the reflection returned by the ornate mirror, and that sight made Ingrid feel as if she were being pierced by ice knives. While bewilderment and disbelief were quickly followed by terror, no one could be seen in the grand ballroom, only Ingrid, who continued moving to the music as if pushed and held by an invisible force. But when her gaze left the mirror, Ingrid could still clearly see her dance partner and the rest of the partygoers, who continued celebrating, oblivious to Ingrid's turmoil. Now overcome with fear and confusion, she struggled to free herself from the grip of the young man she was dancing with, who smiled at her, cordially and affectionately, although now with a certain glimmer of sadness. Until finally, the climax of the piece arrived, and the final bars brought Ingrid once again, almost without her realizing it, right in front of the mirror, in whose reflection she could see once again, with complete clarity, that there was no one else in the great hall. Then Ingrid seemed to feel a sudden and unexpected commotion around her, as if a great glass had shattered loudly before her, while a confusing maelstrom swallowed up the magnificence of the ball, its lights, and its bedecked attendants, who seemed to bid the stunned Ingrid farewell with a smile before vanishing. The young woman now understood that those she had believed to be aristocrats attending a frivolous party were in fact souls wanting to celebrate their last Christmas ball. The whirlwind ceased as unexpectedly as it had begun, and when Ingrid, who felt as if she had woken from a deep and chaotic sleep, opened her eyes, she saw that she was standing in front of the large, now broken mirror. Around her, the ballroom was now dark and silent, empty and dusty. Nothing would have indicated that just a few moments before, the most splendid and joyful Christmas ball the girl could have imagined had been taking place there. Ingrid looked around in complete bewilderment, but there was no trace of the dazzling celebration or its aristocratic attendants. It seemed that the room and the entire mansion had been abandoned many years ago. A short distance away, she made out the large Christmas tree that had presided over the joyful celebration, now withered and rickety, from which some ornaments still hung gloomily. Then, the voices of some children singing carols in the street reached Ingrid. That seemed to finally bring Ingrid back to reality and get her moving. She realized then that despite the dilapidated and decaying surroundings that surrounded her, she was still wearing the elegant red dress and other jewelry she had worn during the ball, and confused, she took a few steps back until her feet stumbled upon something on the floor. It was a large cloth bag, and a paper envelope beside it. The bag contained a huge sum of money, enough to end her poverty, and inside the envelope was a manuscript that, in elegant handwriting, sincerely thanked her for her services and wished her Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.